Hi, I'm Maureen Paraventi. I am here with Chuck Nachreiner, SKC Vice President of Business Development. Welcome, Chuck.
Well, thank you, Maureen. I appreciate it.
Now, today we're going to be talking about low flow air sampling and about pumps that can be adapted to it, like SKC's Air Check with Touch series. We're also going to cover pre and post calibration and why it's important. So we've got a lot to get to, and we're going to do it in a relatively short amount of time. So Chuck, let's start out with what is low flow air sampling and why is it important?
Thank you, Maureen. First, I want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to give this talk about low flow air sampling. And to get on to it, low flow air sampling is pumps that are capable of airflow up to 500 milliliters a minute. That's our definition of low flow air sampling. Typically, these samples are for gas and vapors, and most users would consult a NIOSH or OSHA sampling method. And typically, you'd be using sorbent tubes to sample for gases and vapors up to 500 mils a minute. Also, most of these samples are run at either 50 or 100 or 200 milliliters a minute. And in addition, if you take a look at NIOSH and OSHA methods, what you'd find is you'd find STEL regulations, which are 15-minute regulations, or 8-hour or full shift regulations, which are TWA regulations.
SKC Inc. says that the Pocket Pump Touch revolutionizes low flow sampling. How does it do that?
Absolutely right. And we're really proud of that. I think to get the full perspective, we need to go back to the original pocket pump. So we had a pocket pump, just a pocket pump. We've subsequently come out with a Pocket Pump Touch. The pocket pump came out in the mid-90s, and it was the smallest pump on the market. It was 4 ounces. And it was the first pump on the market that allowed a computer interface. So you'd hook the pump up to a computer via a cable. And what that would allow you to do is that would allow you to program the pump via the computer and take a look at what happened during that runtime. That was really critical because what you could do then is you could set future sample times and dates for a pump and not actually even have to be there, and the pump would start itself. We also had features like lockouts for those folks that were worried about tampering of pumps while in the worker's hands, things along those lines. What happened is that we found out that from the customer base, from feedback from customers, that there was some additions and some updates that needed to happen. And in 2017, we came out with a Pocket Pump Touch. That's the pump that we are currently selling. What we did is we expanded the flow of that pump from 250 to 500 milliliters a minute. So the Pocket Pump Touch will run up to 500 milliliters a minute at 20 inches of water back pressure, which is significant back pressure for sorbent tubes. We also converted it from a cable type system to hook to the software to a computer to Bluetooth. So we have a dongle that you put on the computer that will connect you Bluetooth wise for the software. And then over the course of the last 3 or so years, we've also added an app. So now your cell phone can hook to our pump to look at what the pump is doing and actually do some flow adjustments and things along those lines. The other thing we've done is we've added an exhaust port for those folks that wanted to do Tedlar bag sampling. So you can add an exhaust port to the top of the pump. It attaches right in. The dimensions of the port and the bag are the exact same. Very easy to hook up. The other thing that is a massive improvement from the original pocket pump is the intuitive operation of this pump. This pump, as the name implies, Pocket Pump Touch, has a touch screen. So it is very, very easy to operate. We've intended this pump for workers to be able to operate it without using instructions. And for the most part, I believe that we were very successful in doing that. And we can, as we continue to talk about the pump, we'll talk about some other features that I can actually get into more detail later.
Okay. Okay. You did mention the small size, and I noticed that right away. It is very compact. Why does that matter?
So the Pocket Pump Touch is a little over 8 ounces. And it matters because these pumps are physically placed on a worker to assess their exposure to any workplace vapors or gases that they may be exposed to, which may not be best for their health. And the smaller the pump, the less obtrusive this element is in the work day, which allows them to perform their work as they normally would, which then allows a better overall assessment of that worker's exposure while doing the job, which then leads to a safer and healthier workplace for both employees and employer.
Now, you described the whole process. It sounds like it's continuous innovation with regard to this. And you mentioned that the Pocket Pump has a lot of features, some of which you're still going to discuss. But with all that functionality, can it really be as easy to operate as you indicated?
You ask about the intuitive nature of the pump. So this pump is very easy to use. As an example, to run the pump, all you need to do is there is an on-off button on the top. You press the on-off button. Then you would see a flow indication on the pump, as an example, 100 milliliters a minute. You would touch where it says the flow, and you would then have the ability to increase or decrease that flow by up and down buttons. Once you have the flow set, then you'd put it on the calibrator. Calibrate the pump, making sure that it is within your specification of flow. And you would then confirm that flow by pressing the confirm button. And once you press that confirm button, you are ready to sample. So you take it out, put your sampling device on it, put it on the worker, turn it on, the clock starts from 0, and now you're sampling. The other easy really way to do it is to, as I mentioned earlier, we have DataTrack Pro software that's hooked to a dongle to your computer. You can do a variety of things in that manner. And we'll talk about software and all the things the software can do later. But in terms of intuitive use, hopefully that answered those questions.
It does. I mean, I always vote for easy, but either way, it sounds like something even I might be able to use. Now let's go on. Are there pumps that can be adapted to low flow?
Yes. So there are pumps that can be adapted to low flow. So pumps are typically in constant flow mode. And to adapt pumps to low flow, to be able to get a higher flow pump to go to low flow, what you typically do is attach some type of constant pressure device on it. At SKC, we call that a CPC device. Other manufacturers call it different things. So it's a little piece that fits on the top that adapts the pump to a constant pressure device.
Now, Chuck, you've hinted that there are more features that you can tell us about. Can you go into those now in greater detail?
Absolutely. So the first and obvious one is with a Pocket Pump Touch is the touchscreen, which I've alluded to is a very intuitive operation. As a matter of fact, the first time when this pump came out, the first customer I showed it to, I wanted to make sure it was intuitive. I showed the pump to the customer without any directions in terms of how to use the pump. Within a couple minutes, they were able to operate the pump. And that's basically because of that touchscreen. It is very intuitive. And we use on the touchscreen international signs, which are used all over in terms of instruments or cell phones. So it makes it very easy to maneuver through the pump to get it to do what you want it to do. Some other features are on the top of the pump, there's large lights that indicate whether the pump is running correctly or whether it has flow faulted. Running correctly, you'd see a green light on constantly. And when it has faulted, you'd see a red light there. So you know that there's issues with that pump and you could see it from a distance. And that was the objective, is that as workers work around the facilities that they're working, if a pump flow faults, it can be indicated relatively quickly. So the person in charge of getting a good sample can see that and correct the situation as quick as possible. On this pump, we also have constant flow and constant pressure mode. Most times, I would say over 90% of the time, most people are going to use this in constant flow. Constant flow meaning if indeed back pressure builds up over the course of a sample, the pump recognizes that and stays at the same flow, hence constant flow. It can also be converted to constant pressure. And you may ask, so why would you need constant pressure? A good answer for that would be most times constant flow, great option. Again, 90% of the people use constant flow. Constant pressure can be very valuable when you're sampling at very low flow rates. Constant pressure has a tendency, and I'm talking below 20 mils a minute, constant pressure mode has a tendency to allow the pump to run more consistent flows over the course of a long time. The pump will also correct for different temperatures and pressures. So as an example, if you calibrate the pump inside, and most users are using this inside of a factory facility that has constant temperature and pressure. Although you could have a situation where it could be variable temperature and pressure from the time you calibrate it to the time the pump is done sampling. If you take it outside and it may be colder, this pump will recognize that, and through sensing technology, correct that pump to be plus or minus 5% of the original flow with different temperatures and pressures. It also has lockout, and there's two different types of lockouts. So the first is a screen lockout, and that is the pump automatically locks itself once it's turned on and the user is using it, and that is for accidental bumping. Workers use this and use it in a variety of different functions and may bump up against something and maybe depress a button, do something along those lines. That pump, by virtue of this screen lockout, will not change and allow for accidental changes to the flow parameters of that pump. The second feature is a secure lockout, which the user can specify through a code. And at that point, that pump cannot be changed without that secure code being put back into the pump. That's worked out very well for those folks that are concerned about tampering of the pump once it's out of their sight. The other thing about the Pocket Pump Touch, which is new, is the Bluetooth. As I mentioned prior, we have software that goes with this pump. The software is operational via a dongle that's put USB connection on a computer. And this software is called DataTrack Pro. What that software will allow you to do is set sample runs, as I said with the old Pocket Pump, nothing new there. You can also set up intermittent runs, meaning that the pump can turn on and turn off over the course of a longer period of time. As an example, a day, maybe a week, and allow the pump to run off a single battery charge, which has played as an example with that filter issue I talked about before. They may be using that to allow the pump to run off battery for that week. It also has, you can set preset parameters. So if every day you're going out and sampling at 100 mils a minute with a charcoal tube for 8 hours, you can preset that in a special section that's preset parameters, and then just turn the pump on. One button will allow you to run a sample. The other thing this will do is give you very definitive battery state of the battery that's attached to that pump. It will actually give you a % battery, which is very beneficial for users before they take it out and put it on a worker. So that's all set up prior. Now, after that pump comes back, you can generate, or the pump will give you information that has happened during that sample. And there's, so it'll generate a pump history for each sampling event. And each sampling event, then you will see the serial number of the pump, the start time of the pump, the end time of the pump, which then it'll say run time of the pump. It'll show you if you had any faults, and then it gives you accumulated volume. And then it also has a section for notes, which you can add your own notes at the end. As an example, I sampled Joe at plant C for that day using the XYZ machine. The other parameter that I think it could be very valuable is when you go into these reports, there's a section at the top of the report that gives you a graph of back pressure of that pump performance over the time of that sampling event. And ideally, what you should see is a straight line going across or gradually increasing as your back pressure increases. If you start seeing mountains up and down lines with this back pressure, it could indicate a possible situation where you may not have a viable sample. And we have some regulatory agencies that take hundreds of samples at an individual operation. And if they find values that are out of line, what they do is go back in and look at those back pressure graphs, and they can then pinpoint whether the pump may have had an issue during a sample. The other thing you could do is, once you get this history in the pump, in the memory of the pump, you can export that via CSV file to export to Excel. Another important feature is the pump has the ability, so if we have a firmware update, you would be able to update that firmware via the internet. And when you hook it to the internet via your computer, it automatically asks if the firmware has updated, if you want to change that firmware. And that prevents you from sending, if there's a firmware update, from sending the pump back to SKC and losing time with that pump and not having a pump available to you to take samples. And the other feature is, which is relatively new, maybe three or so years, we have an app available. It's called SmartWave. It's used with both iOS and Android phones. It's a Bluetooth connection with the app, and what it will allow you to view is runtime, flow rate, inlet pressure, atmospheric pressure, and the atmospheric temperature. You can also start and stop the pump. You can set a flow rate in the app. On the top of your phone, if the pump faults, you'll see a big red line to indicate that there's an issue with a pump. And it also has a secure lock. So it will not allow other people with cell phones to tamper with that particular pump. And it will also allow you to lock into an individual pump. So if you have 3 or 4 pumps within the range of that Bluetooth, you can then lock into one pump to look at what that one pump is doing, and then click to the next pump to see what's going on. So that's a general, that's a general update of the features on this pump.
And it's probably not the last that SKC INC is going to do, is it? Seems like it's constantly being improved upon and elaborated upon. Wow.
Good point, Maureen. And so what we do is we try to listen to what our customers tell us. We are constantly out in the field. We're a little different than the rest of organizations. We sell direct in the United States, and we have constant contact internationally through our distribution chain. And so we are out there continually asking customers what it is that they'd like to see in pumps, how it is they'd like to communicate with pumps. And you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, we are currently looking into other features that we can incorporate into pumps to make the customer experience better for them.
I'm not surprised to hear that. Now, can we touch briefly on post and pre-calibration? Why do you have to do both?
So you would do a pre-calibration to make sure your pump is set at the right flow rate. And you do a post-calibration to make sure to give you some assurance that the pump has run at that preset flow rate over the course of that sampling event. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is you need to place a representative media in line for both pre and post. Very, very, very important. That sorbent tube with pocket pumps and a filter with some of our other pumps does create some pressure. And you want to make sure that that pressure is accounted for when you do both pre and post. The other thing that I would say is that in the DataTrack Pro, in the software, again, you could go back to that graph that I indicated earlier about flow, and that would give you some assurance that the flow is consistent over the course of your sampling event.
Let's talk about the Checkmate calibrator. How does that work?
So the Checkmate calibrator is a calibrator that we came out with, my guess is 5-6 years ago. And that calibrator is a differential pressure airflow meter. So it's sensing upstream and downstream of an orifice. And by virtue of that pressure difference, we can calculate flow of that air. And that's pretty much how a Checkmate works.
It comes in 3 different models, which is high, medium, and low flow. Now, how does a company determine which model is best for its needs?
So in terms of the units, we have 3 units. One is a low flow. It'll calibrate between 20 and 500 milliliters a minute. And that's at 1%. And that 1% accuracy is very, very, very important. That's what you really want to pay attention to, is the accuracy of the calibrator you're using. Not all of them are 1%. Now, having said that, at lower flow rates with the Checkmate, between 20 and 50, our accuracy is 2.5. Now, we also have a medium flow, which is 500 mils to 5 liters a minute. Again, 1% from 750 to 5 liters, and from 500 to 750, it's at 2.5%. We also have a high flow, which is 5 liters to 30 liters a minute for those high flow applications. And what I would suggest is that a company really needs to take a look at the base of their exposures in the facility that they're going to be measuring, and make sure they can cover those with the calibrator and the pumps they're going to be using to access people's exposure to keep them healthy.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about low flow air sampling?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak about this with a valued partner like yourself. And last, I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about SKC in general. This year, we've celebrated our 60 years in business. And from the founder on through today, it has always been our goal to protect workers worldwide with quality products, innovation, as we've heard in this presentation, and the best customer service that we can possibly give. And I'd like to say that when you partner with SKC and purchase our products, you have access to to some of the best, most well-informed class of professionals that are willing and eager to help to assist you to get the job done and done right. And we're grateful for all those that have partnered with us over the past 60 years with our product. And we hope that we've provided some benefit with training and technical assistance. And we look forward to partnering with you over the course of the next 60.
You've been hearing from Chuck Nachreiner, SKC Vice President of Business Development. Thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Now, if you'd like more information, just go to www.skcinc.com. That's skcinc.com. Thank you for watching.